Thanks everybody for joining. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. We're gonna wait a few to let some people get joined up here. Just 1 second. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Welcome to Insights. Today's topic will be patient portals, tips and tricks. We will discuss a little bit about reform, some of the challenges that patient portals have today, and also we'll talk about some case studies and what people have done to how they use their portals and things like that, and then we'll obviously open it up for questions for folks at the end. And also the standard disclaimer that this presentation, anything that we're sharing, is obviously not legal binding and is simply a synopsis of publicly available information and best practices that is available out there on the web for anyone to find. And we are also recording this, and this will be put on the website afterwards. Okay, so a little bit of background here. According to a survey done this year by Software Advice, a third of active patients have access to a portal. Only roughly a small percentage, a quarter of patients want the ability to schedule their appointments and things like that online, and a slightly smaller percentage care to view their lab results or even less pay their bills. So as you can tell, there's not a lot of buy-in at the moment from patients, and that's the one thing that obviously the government is trying to stimulate here is more adoption, more buy-in from patients, and sadly that is being put on the providers to sort of spur them along. So you know, as you might guess, as a result of a similar survey, there were 34% of patients surveyed said that the portal was slow or it's very confusing to navigate online, and so it's very, very popular for the world to think that healthcare IT is light years beyond the rest of IT, behind rather, and you can kind of tell, you know, in the web programming world, it doesn't seem to be that is actually a true stereotype. So, you know, the intuitiveness of most websites that you see today doesn't really fit the mold of the back-end portal websites that patients get to log into. So needless to say, everyone is, you know, with information at their fingertips, slow responses and confusing, you know, especially if you're using your iPhone, which most people are, some kind of smartphone or tablet. That technology, while it's been around, is not yet perfected, so we've had some complaints there. Okay, so those were some complaints, and let's talk about some of the reform measurements. And, you know, these slides right here, we're going to talk about the different stages of reform, and I know this is important to a lot of folks, so I've bolded some of the text that is significant on the next slides, and I'll hop back and forth and talk about the differences depending on what stage you're going for. So if you notice at the top of the screen, this is MU1 2013. This is the flex rule that was passed down this year that says, notice menu measure 5, meaning this is not a required measure if you're going for the 2013 edition. So you'd have to ask your administrator what software you're on, but essentially you can be on a 2014 certified edition of your software, your healthcare software. You can be on a pre-2014 or a 2013 edition certified software, and it was not a requirement for MU1 as part of the flex rules. It says menu measure 5 right there. So if you were to opt and use this version of meaningful use, then you had the option of including a portal as part of your attestation. And the definition of this is that, you know, you basically have one. You offer a portal up to 10% of your patient population. And of course, you know, there's no restrictive rules about whether or not anybody's using it. You basically have to have it and offer it. And obviously, if your physician, your EP doesn't order labs or meds or allergies or problems, et cetera, then you are exempt from that. But that is the flex rule. It's a menu measure. It's optional for groups that had not upgraded to a 2014 version of the software yet. So then let's talk about a 2014 edition of the software. So now we're still talking meaningful use stage 1 here, but we're talking about being on a 2014 edition of your software. So now notice in bold it's core measure 11. So now it is a required element. So it's just a slight difference in, so it's still meaningful use stage 1, but it's obviously in a 2014 certified software. And now in bold you can tell the criteria has been changed. So now we're talking about, you'll probably hear people call it 50% rule. More than 50% of all these unique patients provided access to their record. Certain time frame was the ability to view, download, and transmit their data. This is a core measure. So if anybody asks the question, is the portal required in meaningful use stage 1, the answer is yes or no, depending on whether or not you're using a 2013 edition software or a 2014 edition software. So if they say, yeah, we're on 2014 edition, you know, we took our upgrade and we're going for, you know, year 2, stage 1 of meaningful use, then yes, absolutely. This is a core measure, meaning it is required. You have to have access to it. And you've got to get 50% of your folks enrolled. And, you know, that is a big question. How do I possibly do that? And we'll talk more about that here momentarily. But that is MU1 2014 edition software, required core measure 11. So let's talk about meaningful use stage 2. So obviously, very few people opted to go for that this year. Very, very small percentage. And the portal definitions are like threefold in here. It's very similar to, it's a 2014 edition software, but they've got a few caveats here. So it's still the 50%. So if you notice the definition, it's core measure, and they call it 7.1 or 7 subset 1. And what that means is 50% of the people provided access to their record, just exactly how it read back on this previous slide right here for core measure 11, but now for meaningful use stage 2. So it's the exact same piece, but then there's 2 more requirements, and I'll show them to you here. So that's 7.1. 7.2, another subset, says 5% of your unique patients have to basically get in and interact with the system. So again, you know, there's a lot of questions on what that means. And so I'm going to show you yet one more slide that better defines that. But this is basically saying, okay, 50% of your people got enrolled, but then 5% have to actively get in there, view, download their information, or transmit it to a third party. The last piece of it, and this is MU2 again, guys, is this core measure 17 here that says, kind of vague, a secure message was sent using the electronic messaging function. That's the kicker. So what that means, and it depends on your portal, and there's lots of different types of portals that are out there, but there has to be a communication feature in there for the patient to interact with the office. So basically, in layman's terms, that means I log on my portal and I type up something that says, hey, you know, hey, doc, my stomach hurts or my ankle hurts, I broke my leg, and the provider or the staff replies, well, get in here and get a cast. You know, get in here and let us take a look at it. That interaction is that secure messaging that we're talking about here. So that is core measure 17. So I'm going to go back and talk about that again. So MU1 2013 Flex rule is not a requirement. It's a menu measure. And if you're going for it, then you basically have to have the portal installed and available. But then once you hit the 2014 edition software of MU1, you do have to enroll the 50%. And in Meaningful Use 2, it's 50% plus 5% of the people viewing and actively using it, and then obviously using the secure message feature inside that portal. By the way, so the exception, I don't know if you've been following the slides, but they were always right here like this, where the physician doesn't order labs or anything like that, meds, allergies, problems. For Meaningful Use Stage 2, they added this other one down at the bottom, and it says what basically that means is if you didn't have any office visits, or they're a low, they're in it's common with housing projects to where they don't have the internet broadband availability to provide that portal access to all their people. Then you have a legitimate exception rule to a test. All right. Okay, so then Stage 3, and again, don't quote me on this, this is what's currently proposed, and I think, as we all know, it has a tendency to change. But at the moment, middle of November of 2014, the new requirements are talking about 24-hour turnaround of messaging. When you get one, they'll bump the 5% up to 10% for that secure messaging that we talked about. And then obviously the ability to contribute that information electronically has been added. And then for a patient, and then the Blue Button Initiative, which is just absolutely brand new. And if anyone's, you can Google that and research the Blue Button Initiative. It's the government's, it literally, I should have put a picture in here, but there's a little blue down arrow button that you can go out to My Healthy Vet or healthyvet.com or something like that, .org, and it's at the top right corner, you'll see the blue button download. So if you have an account, it's already rolled out there where you can log in to that website, and you click blue button, and it pulls your entire history down and exports it into a nice readable fashion so anybody can have their full comprehensive document right there at their fingertips. So as that becomes more and more prevalent and they interface with more and more folks, blue button will be more and more common. You'll hear that terminology. Again, still Stage 3 proposed only at this point. Okay, so, let's, done talking reform, let's talk real world items now. So, as organizations rolling out patient portals, it's probably good to see down the road a little bit. Let's talk about some of the benefits that exist. So obviously, as a patient, you have preventative care, disease management reminders, reminders in general that you have some things to do to proactively manage your health that will greatly increase your patient engagement. And compliance is very, very similar along the same lines. If you're a diabetic and you need to routinely get in there and get your A1C done, or if you're constantly in some kind of cardiology environment where you need to get a regimented lab order done on a recurring basis, portals help that like crazy. You obviously get increased exposure, so your operational efficiency, you can then sort of deal with patients outside of normal clinic hours. You can be more engaged and operate a little smoother. If you've ever seen an office that has been out and using the portal for a long time, it's kind of eerie, but after a while, a sort of a quiet lull comes over that back end area where it's all calls is now being transformed into all portal messages, and so there's much more typing and a lot less screaming. It's actually really nice. Anyway, and then, if you're a marketer, brand loyalty, so if you have a really nice portal, it can also help retain those patients and help keep them around for a while. If they don't have a reason to change, they're not going to go anywhere. So then, one of the questions that groups face is, okay, do I want to go with the portal that my EHR vendor is offering me, or do I want to go with an outside portal? Do I want to go with a third-party portal? Because I've heard of other portals that exist. They say they can interface with my software. Which one should I use? So you might, obviously cost is going to be a factor in there, and I'm sure that's always being weighed. Generally speaking, portals that come from your software vendor says this is the portal that we use, is going to be a lot more integrated, so that they'll be able to easily send and receive their own types of documents and results and lab results and things like that. Smoother, quicker, and they'll come back into your software better in a large majority of cases, just because they have the source code. They develop it to work exactly with their back-end database that maybe a third-party vendor might not have access to. So that's something that if you're considering it and you use those functions, that might be something, getting a demo and finding out that that's a go, no-go situation. But, obviously if a third-party portal might be a good way to go if your vendor doesn't have a good portal up and running, or the rollout is rejected by a lot of patients for one of several reasons, then a third-party portal might be the way to go. And if you're in some, strange multi-EHR environment where they have a functionality and the EHR vendor can't meet it, that's something to consider as well. And then obviously, for meaningful use, if your group is struggling to hit it or they can't roll one out that's certified, you might need to go with a third party, but that's on a case-by-case, of course. Okay, so difficulty. What are some challenges that portal rollouts are currently facing? Needless to say, enrollment is going to be a big one. Getting at patient engagement, if you've ever worked a front desk and heard someone, who's supposed to be getting patients enrolled in the portal as they call in, and then you've got a soccer mom driving her kids to the game, and she's calling a doctor appointment in for one of them, and they're trying to, what's your email address? And the kids are screaming in the background, and she doesn't want to deal with it. I mean, that's the kind of situation we live in today, is getting people enrolled, and the workflow isn't conducive. So a lot of times there's auto-enrolling features that exist out there today with certain softwares, depends on what yours does and is capable of doing, but you can sometimes enroll a patient for them. Just let them know ahead of time. You can do a bulk enrollment or a mass mail. From your IT staff can send out a message to everybody with an email address saying, "Hey guys, get ready. We're enrolling our population base in our new patient portal. If you don't want to participate, just let me know. Reply right now, and I'll opt you out, or I won't include you in the auto enrollment." And then silence is consent. But if you enroll folks with the tools that you have, then that can sometimes help you over the hump with your 50%, your 50% enrolled folks. So there is one option is rewarding for use or mass mailing patients to help them to encourage that interaction. So rewarding for use, you got to be careful with that one, because there's all types of inducement laws out there. I know it's a big Medicare thing, but there are some commercial payers that have a problem with that as well. That would be an example of that would be, I don't know, we're raffling off a TV to anybody who get your name in there, enroll in the portal, and we'll toss your name in the hat for a free TV or whatever, and so people, you have to be really careful about that, and you would only offer that to like your current patient base. You wouldn't offer that you wouldn't put that up on a billboard, for example. All right. Okay, so more challenges. So, yeah, foreign languages. So depending on where you are in the country or world, most portals at the moment will not have or only have a few languages built into their patient portal website. So you can choose between English and Spanish, and that's about it. You know, and you can't exactly rely on folks to have, you know, Google Chrome's translator built in, you know, plug-in support for whatever, you know, flag you feel like clicking on at the top of the screen. So there's, unless you, I mean, if you don't have that, it really isn't conducive. And so, you know, that really can be up to the software vendor to create documents in different languages that represent their patient base and be able to send those out by preferred language inside the patient's software somewhere inside their record. And, you know, that often involves customization and can be difficult or, you know, put on a future enhancement request. So that's a big challenge. And then, you know, ways around that, obviously, is you can designate oftentimes a English-speaking guarantor or caregiver, somebody that can, you know, operate their portal for them and translate for them is one option. That's relatively popular in Medicare Advantage programs. If you have a third-party portal that does support additional languages, it might be worth using. And then, yeah, if you do have if you can identify patients with a particular language, you can have a specific campaign deployed specifically for them to help that barrier get torn down. All right. And then, yeah, lack of access is absolutely one of the challenges that folks face. Computer access being one of them, so I'm sure we all know. If you look at this graph on the right, smartphone ownership by age or income grouping here, and you can just tell, obviously, groups that have, as they get older, have less and less access for whatever the reason might be to a smartphone or to a computer. So we know this ahead of time, and we have to take action as a result. So one thing that is popular is, you know the patient's going to come in, they're going to be in the waiting room, put a terminal in there, put a machine in there so that they can interact with it, learn it, and use it. And then, of course, you know, if you know, as people get the new iPhone 6 Plus and they throw away all the other computers in their house and they just carry this thing around with them, make sure your portal has a smartphone app or is mobile friendly. Otherwise, people will move on and have a challenge getting in. All right. Okay, and obviously we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but age is a big barrier sometimes. Folks that are a little bit older sometimes aren't comfortable with technology. And, you know, obviously some suggestions are, like we talked about, designate a caregiver and make sure that they have access to particularly computer classes. I've even seen certain programs where they were giving out old school phones to groups that they needed to ping for certain types of the readmissions to hospitals. They just want to make sure they're still doing okay, so they give them a free phone just to text them for a little while. I've seen situations where you know, they can provide folks that kind of technology if it's affordable to their population base that doesn't have it. Okay. All right. So some specialties, they obviously don't have face-to-face interaction or as much with the patient. Sometimes you get a really, really good, you know, endocrinologist, rheumatologist, something like that. They, you know, you might not see them for 6-8 months just because the challenge is that, you know, they're that in demand. So, you know, really, in all honesty, you're going to have to use auto-enrollment in those cases because those people just aren't going to get in and sit down at a computer in your 3-month window. However, you very well could be exempt depending on specialty. But yeah, lean heavily on that auto-enrollment in certain cases like that. All right, finally, the last challenge here. So if you have any specialties that do have a lot of psych or mental or physical disabilities, those types of specialties that have those types of patients, oftentimes they will already have a caregiver, so piggybacking on that and having them help with enrollment in the portal for that patient is often what they do in those cases. And then sometimes, yeah, there can be hardware to provide those guys with that maybe they can benefit from, or you know, even if they, you know, sometimes they might need some type of document with a bigger font size. That can help. So it is case by case, specialty by specialty. But if you have challenges like that, a lot of times you can overcome those. But that would be on an individual basis. So let's talk about what one group did here in Miami, Florida. In a Medicare Advantage clinic that had a lot of their patient base was getting older and non-English speaking. And so they actually did implement a Spanish patient portal. And they did a couple of things. So they had, they actually created some of the old rooms that did have paper that were file storage, and they took that out and they put in like a training class basically, and they taught people as part of their socialization classes how to use computers. It was insane. So they basically sat these people down and said, here's a mouse, here's a keyboard, you know, here's how you interact with a computer. And you know, because they're used to going to these socialization classes because it's Medicare Advantage, that's a big piece of health, is the social aspect of it. And so they would train them on how to use a computer in general, never mind a portal, but here's how you use a computer. And then they would turn around and say, okay, well, let's make you an email. Let's make you an email. Let's go out here to, you know, Gmail or Yahoo or wherever, and let's make you a free one. And they would go through that process and get everybody, you know, these people finally have an email address. I mean, it's pretty fantastic in a lot of cases. Some of those people would never have dreamed of having an email address. But, you know, the entire time they're doing it, they're enrolling in the portal. And, you know, they're auto-enrolling themselves essentially. And then they're getting that 50% and they're getting that 5% because now if you show them how to send a message to their doctor, done. There's your 5%. So that's kind of how they did it, and it was very popular. And you know, the patients would come back and say, "Well, are we going to use the computer again today?" You know, I thought that was kind of cool, and so you know, they can work and deal with those patients. So that was actually a pretty successful portal rollout that we did. All right, and then the other case study that we included in these slides, there was an IPA in Chinatown on the West Coast, and obviously a good population is non-English speaking there in Chinatown. And as you might guess, with some customization, they implemented a rollout of a Chinese version of a patient portal. And very, very similar, auto-enrolled patients. One cool thing that they had was a local nonprofit group was able to get them a grant for computer training and sort of funded a lot of that hardware and a salary of an FTE of someone to sit there and train folks And so they just added the patient portal to the curriculum and rolled it out that way, and that was obviously able to keep their costs way down to help roll out that portal. And that was even actually before a lot of this reform stuff even started occurring and mandating it. So they were actually ahead of their time. And of course, caregivers were absolutely involved in that process, especially whenever it came to bringing some of the more geriatric patient group into the room that would obviously sit down next to them at the keyboards and register themselves as well. So it was sort of a very, very joint effort. So that was pretty cool. So that's one of the mistakes that I think a lot of folks do when they roll out the portal is you'll have the front desk person going, give me your email, we have to do this portal. And that's not the way you want to roll a portal out. You want to either auto-enroll if you can, of course, but you have to be polite and firm, and it's a new policy. And you have to post, documentation. And it's been around long enough, and people have seen, patient portals and pings and reminders and things like that for long enough at their dentist's office and everywhere else. So it's starting to become more and more familiar, and enrolling patients in the portal is while it's still unpopular, it's easier to do these days, as long as you stay firm and get them enrolled and still be polite about it. The patient base that we're seeing, if it's done right, it can be a very positive thing. So to recap. Most common questions, yeah, patient portal, in theory, guys, yes, is required for meaningful use. It absolutely is. I mean, yeah, in the one flex rule, it's a menu set, so it's not absolutely required. It's optional in that case, but the rest of the world, the rest of the time, yeah, it's required. MU2 and above, of course, yep, secure messaging is required, so make sure your portal has that feature. Do your due diligence before you go choose a portal. Make sure that the portal you're choosing is absolutely certified. Will it work for what you need? Make them give you a demo. Find everything out before you can ahead of time, and obviously planning and budgeting is a great idea so that you don't back up against those deadlines. Like, we need to roll out a portal right now and auto-enroll everybody because our attestation period starts here in, 3 days. Well, for most everybody, it's January 1. You need the full year. So if you haven't already begun the process of executing this, I would highly recommend doing that as soon as you humanly possibly can to get ahead of the game, because I'm sure a lot of software vendors are going to have a lot of requests, and they need time to process paperwork on their side, and you have to have time to push it up through your own organizations to get approval. So it's something worth starting immediately if you haven't already started and you know you're going to need it for next year. That is high level. The patient portal presentation. I do my level best to unmute folks. Anybody has a question, please feel free to ask away.
All right, everyone has been unmuted. If you have any questions, and also just so you know, I'm going to be putting this presentation on YouTube and on SlideShare afterwards. But the floor is open, so feel free to ask questions now.
Hi, this is Laura from Voxen. I have a question about the 50% requirement. You were saying that was with the 2014 version of the software. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna.
And where does that 50% come from? Is it the 50% of all the patients in your practice, or 50% of what you saw in that year? That's a little confusing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it is by a unique patient count. And one thing that is, and this is software by software. Let me pull the slide back up here. So are you going for stage 1, meaningful use stage 1? You have the 2014 edition, or do you know what edition software you've got?
Stage 1.
Stage 1, okay. Assuming it's required and needed 50%, yeah, then you're at this slide right here. So the 50% is, so if you have an email address in the system that you, it depends on what software you have. If you auto-enroll them, you can sort of get a head start on that. But that is a unique patient population count. And it's in the attestation period, of course.
So it's 50% of the patients that we've seen
in that period, exactly right.
Within that attestation period, okay. And when you're talking about the 2014 version, you were talking, and I know I'm doing stage 1, but when you're talking about 2014 version of what?
So it's, we could probably, so essentially you'd have to ask your software vendor, for example, if it's NextGen, for example, I'm just guessing, there's a specific version number that represents 2014 and a specific version that represents 2013. In NextGen's case, it's 5.8 UD1 is considered 2014, and anything under that is 2013.
Yeah, so we're in 5.8 UD1, so that would mean meaningful use 2 then for us, would it not?
So that would mean, have you guys already attested for stage 1, year 1, and this is year 2? Okay.
There's a mix of that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, then exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good questions. Anybody else?
Hi, this is Michelle Kimura from the city of Long Beach. I had a question. Do you know the name of the grantor who provided the funding for the computer training for that IPA?
Off the top of my head, I do not, but I can find out for you very quickly. That will not be a problem. Yeah. Did you use your accurate email address when you registered for the for the meeting? If so, I've got it, and I can just send it to you.
Oh, yes.
Otherwise, you can just email the one that's on the screen, too. Either way.
Yes, I provided it.
Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, I'll shoot that over to you. Not a problem. All right.
This is Michelle. This is Michelle again. Sorry, I had a question. We have not purchased and installed the patient portal for NextGen. We are NextGen.
Okay.
We're a NextGen client. So I was just wondering, is there anybody on the phone that already has the NextGen patient portal, and just wanted to find out what you guys thought about it?
This is Gwen Whistler from Maslin Associates. We have the patient portal. It's been a struggle, but I think NextGen has finally gotten their hands around it and got it fixed. It's been stable for us for about the last 2 weeks, but we were having problems with the NCS server going down. So we would give a patient a token, and we would hire temporary employees to sit in our lobby and help the patients register, because we have a high percentage of elderly patients who may not be extremely computer literate. So we were helping them so we meet the numbers. And we would give the patient a token, and then either the server would be extremely slow or it would lock up. And the portal was actually down about a month ago for over a week and a half and wasn't even accessible at all. But in the last 2 to 3 weeks, it's been stable. So I know that they had a lot of issues as well where, like, we don't have the patient appointment scheduling turned on, and originally in the portal, it would show the patient, it would say up at the top, there are no scheduled appointments. Even if the patient would have a scheduled appointment, because we have the appointment scheduling functionality turned off, even if they had an appointment, it wouldn't have one. And it was just very confusing for patients and initiated a lot of phone calls. I think with a lot of customer complaints, I think that they've made some improvements, and I think they will continue to make improvements here through the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't necessarily be, you know, I think that things are going in the right direction.
Yeah, if anybody was at the UGM, they announced that they'd have a new iPad app here soon, and it's like this month, and they're rolling out some fixes in the middle of November. So, yeah, I think some good things are coming. We did have one question on the chat message, and this is a good point. It is NextGen specific, so cover your ears if you're not using NextGen. But if you put the word no email, no spaces, NOEMAIL in the email address, that will count. I'm probably not going to post this part of the video, but that is what support has told us, that if you have that character string for the email, that it will not increase your denominator, or I think it wouldn't count, so it wouldn't hurt you. So if you have someone sitting there refusing to provide that, I think you can go with that answer.
So Dan, were you just saying that if someone, like a patient, puts in some bogus information, that it might not get counted?
So what I just mentioned about the no email string, if you put those words in, it'll count. Yes, I am aware that. So the hard part here is if you go through manual installation process in NextGen, so you've got a bad email address in there and you hit send, and you've got the token, for example, they'll never enroll. So you won't actually get a 3 in, a status of enrolled in the NG-Web enrollments table. It'll never count. So you want them to have a good email address in there. But if you auto-enroll or bulk enroll with the bulk enrollment utility, it's going to count it. It's going to bulk enroll them. You'll get a 3 status immediately, and it'll count next time your H2M job pushes that metadata up.
That's not good.
Yeah, so what we actually do is you can just run a script that'll find all the email addresses that are bogus, one that doesn't conform to a format. So one that doesn't say, people will put something ridiculous in there like a work phone extension in the email field, and we run scripts to identify that and just move those into a comments field or a user-defined field and then delete it out of the email address field so it doesn't cause problems with bulk enrollment.
I have another question. Dan, you and your team, your company, work with a number of EHR vendor software. What are some of the positives and of some of the patient portals that you've seen out there? Like, what cool things have you seen done, implemented?
Yeah, love me some Follow My Health mobile app. That is one of those third-party tools that are out there that integrates with different softwares like Allscripts and things like that. I personally use Follow My Health, and I can tell you. So I have type 1 diabetes, and I've got sensors everywhere. And one of the cool things that does is my doc immediately reviews my blood sugar in real time, and can basically it's like a texter through that thing because those messages pop up on my iPhone. So it's just like anything else. I mean, how many apps do you have on your phone that you use for texting? Follow My Health pops up just like any of the rest of them. So that one's pretty cool that I've seen vendor agnostic groups use off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I can just barely hear whoever's speaking. If it's a conference phone, maybe move a little closer if you could, please. Sorry, if anybody's still on the WebEx itself, I just pasted my email into the chat window if anybody needs it. And you can obviously email the one that's up on the screen. Anything else? Anybody else wants to chat about patient portal? Good conversation. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody, for attending. We'll put this up, and hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Dan.